Why do you think? So it's interesting that it was the conversation about JK Rowling that went viral. I mean, she certainly caused an endless stream of political upset in the UK, turned into quite a stunning advocate for free speech. And she has, in fact, focused on this trans issue, which is likely the most bizarre issue that's ever dominated the political space, as far as I can tell. And I guess one of the things that your video demonstrated was the pertinence of that issue to students who have questionable reasons for being concerned about it to begin with. Like, why do you think that this particular student was possessed by the belief that was a thing to begin with? Because that's also a bastardization of words in the most manipulative possible way, to take a clinical terminology, phobia, and then to append it to objection to anything that the person who's objecting, or what would you say? I can object to something. If someone's irritated about that, they're going to medicalize my objection and describe it as a pathology. That's what happens when you use the term phobia. It's unbelievably manipulative. And I would say the radical leftists are stunningly good at that manipulation of language. But now you have a student who is objecting to JK Rowling on the basis of transphobia, and you're asking questions about it. Now, is that part of what also got you in it's obviously one of the things that made this go viral, but was it also one of the things that got you in trouble?
Well, there's no way for me to know exactly. I think that there's as you know, most things in life are far more complex than a singular explanation. I think that a lot of it was the virality itself. Given that we're a school where there are some loose practices, there's been things like the two principals just being removed. There was attacks of scandal like a few years prior to my arrival. Because we have the way grades are assigned, often it's the site sitting there. It's like, okay, what's Jimmy going to get in your class? Give him like a 73. And there's no record, there's no reasoning to it. And that's literally how it occurs. Why did they offer me $9,000 to shut up, or why to sign this? And like, why do you need an NDA?
So there was worry about potential public attention. Well, you can understand. I mean, the school that you're operating in is insanely complex. There's absolutely no way to run a school like that isn't full of trouble, obviously, because the whole school's built on trouble. And so I can imagine that the people who are running the school would be nervous about that, because I can't possibly see that there's any way that you could do it right. Right? I mean,
that's a good point.
Well, you mentioned that teachers come for one day and they leave, or they come for a week. It's just, it's designed, it's a system designed to collate chaos and to try to produce some sort of order, but it seems to me to be entirely impossible. Pretty much no matter what you do, you're going to do something wrong.
That's a fair point.
How the hell could you possibly avoid it?
That's a
Every
good point.
single one of those kids is a pitfall.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that that's not a criticism. It's just well, the system's designed so that every single kid that comes there is trouble on stilts. And then you're also going to have the case that many of the teachers who are going to apply are going to be people who are applying to that school because it's a last-ditch possibility. And so
I often I wondered that sometimes. I'm like, why am I here? I mean, the health insurance is awful. It's like pays, not why choose. That's why people leave. But there's a lot of good people there that aren't. It's not like this is the bottom of the barrel teachers that can't. There are some of those. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
Right, there'd be some of those, yes.
But there are also many good people that are doing it because there's something fulfilling about it that I miss, to be honest. I miss it.
Well, I think what drew my attention to your video, and also what made me want to talk to you, is because I think the reason that video went viral and drew the attention of the people whose attention it did draw was because you were obviously very sane and careful in an insane situation discussing something utterly preposterous. And it was all of that contrast that made it fascinating. I mean, the fact that that issue even arose in a school is ridiculous under anything approximating normal times. And yet you handled it carefully and thoughtfully, and you did it in a way that was obviously of educational benefit to the students. And that none of that should be surprising, actually, like the manner in which you addressed it. But it's also the fact that that sane response to that question is surprising in the education system that made it go viral. And so, because we're so accustomed to seeing crazily woke, ideologically possessed, ranting narcissists acting as teachers, ideologically addling children when they ask questions that they should have no concern about whatsoever. Like, it just strikes me as utterly preposterous that a 15-year-old kid would think that it was necessary for him to accuse JK Rowling of transphobia.
17.
17. Okay, so that's just an indication of the state of the school system in general. And
I don't think he was even accusing her. I think he was just repeating what he thought was reality.
Of course.
You know?
Of course, exactly. Well, you said that as you investigated with, some relatively elementary but also eminently sane questions, that revealed itself very quickly. He was just spouting the cliches of the moment, right? The radical cliches of the moment. And was he doing that because he thought he should? Like, what was your impression of the reasons for his questions?
He genuinely believed that was what the truth was. He thought that was reality. He articulates that. I've heard many classmates state this, so it must be true. In the same way, you hear this often with people. I just made a critique video with Barry Weiss doing this. I was a little hard on her on Joe Rogan when she's saying it's the same pattern. And she's applying this to Tulsi Gabbard, and he presses her on it slightly, and it dissolves. And we all are capable of doing. We all do this in our lives. I'm not above it, but
no one's above it. No one's above it. We radically seek. We seek to establish consensus rapidly and radically. And if there's no challenge to the consensus, that's good, because it means that we're unified. But it also means that we can build a false consensus. And that happens continually. And I mean, that's one of the dangers of so-called populism, is that it's a false consensus, right? It's a consensus of the moment. It's got no staying power. It can't iterate across time. Now, the antidote to populist consensus is something like alignment with eternal tradition, because it stops the proclivity for rapid consensus from pathologizing. I mean, it's actually a good thing, all things considered, because if human beings couldn't reach agreement on most things rapidly, all we would ever do is fight. But the danger, of course, is a false consensus. And that's obviously what you were questioning.